I am a teacher of the International Open Yoga University, a group of minds 23 and a group.
Early 22.
Yes. Today, we are going to read the Yoga of Falling in Love with you. Tanya will continue.
But we have a series of lectures delivered by Vadim Valeryevich Zaporozhtsev in the 2009 year at the Cultural Center of Enlightenment. There are 22 of their lectures there. Well, and we will gradually reread them. Since it was a long time ago, I am Tatiana Tatova, and this is Anton Gillot, and we are studying at the International Open University. And we begin.
Yes.
Yoga of Falling in Love. This lecture was delivered on the 23rd of January, 2009 year, by Vadim Valeryevich Zaporozhets. So, lectures about yoga falling in love. Falling in love is the most powerful, bright, all-encompassing experience of a person. It holds boundless potential for learning about ourselves and the world around us. According to the traditions of the Open Yoga School, the yoga of falling in love is the fastest and highest path to enlightenment. According to this yoga, being in the highest state of falling in love is equal to having the highest superconsciousness. But who can use it, and what obstacles may arise on the way? What do lovers feel? Why do we suffer? What was this world created for? The yoga of falling in love answers these questions and gives recommendations on where to start in order to get closer to the source of knowledge and love. And this section, that is yoga falling in love, this section of the yoga triad is dedicated to falling in love. To get a more complete picture of this yoga, we will look at it from different angles and points of view, and will study it from simple to complex. Each of us woke up this morning in a good or bad mood, accomplished important things for ourselves, and before this day, we had a week full of heroic deeds and labor achievements. And before this week, all previous lives. A completely philosophical question arises. And what is all this for? Why were we born into the world? Why do we have to go to work? Why do we need to go to bed in the evening and wake up in the morning? Why do we strive for some goals while others frighten us and we avoid them? Life for each of us can develop in different ways. For someone, it is a series of achievements, a road strewn with petals of growth. And for someone, it is a daily overcoming of suffering, torment, and misunderstanding, a collision with what is deeply negative. At the same time, there are many annoying and frightening factors that cause disgust and apathy and unwillingness to look at the whole white world. The background of life can be very different. There may be a change of mood, the feeling that life is beautiful and you want to live. After a while, it changes to a feeling that everything is very bad. There is no way out of the current situation, and the prospect for the near future makes it clear that nothing will change for the better. But then again, the rays of hope illuminate our path, inspiring optimism and joy. And a person who has embarked on the path of yoga, self-knowledge, engaged in different sections of yoga, notes to himself that the amount of suffering is reduced, and spiritual and mental well-being improves, clarity of consciousness comes, and life changes for the better. But this is within the framework of how you are engaged. If it's good, there is a wave of positive emotions and sensations. And if there are no classes, a wave of laziness, stupidity. Stupidity captures and again twists a swamp of gray life.
Of course, the question arises, what is all this for, and for what purposes? Why is everything exactly like this? Why do we go out into the street and see dirty roads, unshaven people who stink and do not want to look at? Why is everything not done as we would like to see? Why is there this grayness, dirt, and squalor of relations between people? Who did all this, for what and for what purposes? These are complex questions that are difficult to find answers to. The mass media constantly broadcast sad and gloomy episodes of our life associated with illness and death. Television broadcasts that one died, then the second, then the third. Straight continuous process. In the news, the car broke down with passengers, then a tsunami, then a fire, then a flood, then a homicidal maniac. All this flashes in the headlines, and it seems that everything is negative. And when we are faced with such concepts as death, it becomes completely uncomfortable and scary. This fear, multiplied by a lack of understanding of what is happening, makes the situation even more sad. Not only do we not understand, but also the whip in the form of death pursues at every step, and we do not know at what second. Trouble can creep up. Inside, a neurosis is being developed in anticipation of the fact that today he was lucky, he left alive. And tomorrow it is unknown what will happen. If we pay attention to the mass media, then involuntarily there is a feeling of probability theory that if a projectile fell firm behind, then from the front, and the third projectile is already flying at us. As a result, life begins to appear in a gloomy light. And the more we begin to develop our intelligence, the more we understand the dark and frightening side of life. A person who has not studied biology, not knowing that there are a lot of pathogenic microbes around us, who sleep and see how we could make another pack, will multiply in the form of plague or cholera. Those who begin to study medicine and are faced with a huge number of potentially possible diseases think with horror that each of them can arise inside their own body. The mimics even come to a certain surprise about how we are still alive at all. There are statements by Mark Twain that when he began to read the Handbook of Diseases, he found absolutely all diseases except prenatal fever. If you start to study the moments related to doing business, but rumors of a universal crisis reach you, and you have not yet paid off your debts, and now your life again turns into the horror of waiting for a blow. Knowledge multiplies sorrow. The more we begin to learn how this whole world works from the standpoint of reason and experience, the less reason we have to stay in piggy happiness and fewer reasons for rosy forecasting of our lives. The more we get involved in statistics and things related to the lives of certain people, the more we see that everything still leads to old age, illness, and death.
And now we're going to talk about three categories of people. All people are divided into three large categories. The first group of people does not have a very developed mind yet, but there are a lot of instincts, on the basis of which living life does not make you think about future events. Such a person knows that the average life expectancy, for example, in Russia is less than 60 years for men, but at the same time, a man begins to make plans for the next 200 years because part of his mind, although he understands statistics, does not relate to himself. That is, it's someone else who will live in the area of 60 years, and he considers himself immortal. Such people live without thinking and are not the ones treating themselves to Hamlet's questions to be or not to be until they reach the average age. More or less depends on how much alcohol he drank, how many cigarettes he smoked, what kind of food he ate, and a lot of other factors. And they go after other representatives of the human race. The next category of people whose mind begins to develop at a fairly high level, and they, like the first group of people, also understand what awaits them, but, unlike the first group, their life is more miserable. The first group of people is in a state of puppy delight from the flowing life. They understand that there is death, illness, disappointment, failure, but the habit of not paying attention to it makes their life happier. The second group of people, who have a more developed mind, can no longer discount the negative aspects. Oddly enough, the second group of people has a darker life, and the more they learn about it, the more reason to worry. Here we have numerous scenarios, ranging from Shakespeare's Hamlet to Gautama Buddha's script. Even in his early youth, the Buddha was a fairly intelligent person with a developed mind. It was enough for him to see a dying, sick and old man once, as all his ideas about a joyful life were poisoned. This indicated that even in his earliest youth, the Buddha's intellect was quite strongly developed, and by one example alone, he concluded that he was waiting for every person, including himself. The same situation applies to religious adherents of certain teachings. They see the suffering of this world with a very clear and unambiguous logic for themselves, and therefore, in order to accustom themselves to these sufferings, they go to monasteries to spend time in pious reflections, that everything is perishable, that everything will fall apart. If someone is born, then he will surely die. In other words, the development of intelligence makes a person experience great suffering. But there is a third category of people. This category also has a highly developed mind, like the second one, but they are in absolutely unclouded joy and happiness of being, which to a certain extent makes them with skins from the first category. But only the first category rejoiced, because of its not very distant departure into the state of an animal, well, in terms of understanding the purpose and way of life. And in this third category, everyone is very clearly aware and knows where to aim, what dangers were, are, and will be. That is, their intelligence is also brilliantly developed, but at the same time, when you encounter them, positivism and the joy of life literally shines through in them. But what does this third category know that the first two do not know? Everyone sees only what his spirit allows him to see. From a formal point of view, the knowledge written in books can be read by anyone. Yes, the first category is not yet smart enough to fully comprehend this acquired knowledge, and therefore it is having fun. The second category is already smart enough to understand everything, but for some reason this does not lead it to the state of people of the third category, who at one time, knowing all this and understanding, remain in a state of joy and happiness. The third group of people has a certain distinguishing feature. Moreover, they do not hide anything and tell everything they know. But for some reason, the previous two categories either do not know or do not understand what they want to convey to them. The third category has a different knowledge, vision, lifestyle, which is transparent in the palm of your hand, but which others cannot know. What do these people know that others don't? From the standpoint of the Yogitriada and the Yoga of Love, this group has such knowledge, thanks to which even the most terrible scenarios of life development and the most pessimistic forecast no longer look so terrifying. There is a kind of super-knowledge. But at the same time, this is not the knowledge that we are used to and that can be read in books. This is a kind of higher, superlogical knowledge that cannot be expressed in words. And if you try to express it in words, then only words will remain. And the first two categories will never understand what permeates these very words. Because it is not only knowledge, it is also in the state of seeing.
In Sanskrit, the word in the form means vision, and it can also be translated as knowledge. People belonging to the third group just have this knowledge. Moreover, they can receive all the remaining knowledge that was, is, and will be. The first category of people rather goes by touch, as an animal does, making big experiments on its life. Let's take a dog or a cat as an example. If a dog is running, you think it knows where it is running with such an intelligent look. She doesn't know anything, but makes a good face at a bad game. The dog explores the world experimentally. Consequently, the third group of people does not explore the world experimentally, does not run with an intelligent look like a dog, but has all the knowledge that can be obtained in this way. Indeed, the dog ran around, found a trash can, saw a bone, and was glad. The knowledge gained from experience has been developed that if you run around the trash for a long time, then a delicious bone will appear. And the third category of people do not need to run around the trash to know the same thing. The second category of people. These are mostly analysts, but in a bad sense of the word, smart guys, whose reasoning leads to the fact that their physiognomy is stretched more, and their voice becomes barely audible, full of sarcasm and cynicism, devoid of strength. Such people have a fairly good command of their minds and can justify philosophical and other concepts that boil down to one concept. Now everything is bad, but it will be even worse. And these people also have the most favorite topic. Everything is going to the point that tomorrow we will all die. People of the third group are also perfectly able to operate with all smart arguments and get conclusions. For example, that perhaps another pig, donkey, or chicken mushroom will arise in the human habitation spaces and mow down everyone like a medieval plague. But unlike the second group of people, they do not make such pessimistic conclusions because they have something else. Having the same analytical abilities, these people are not inclined to be emotionally pessimistic. If the second group spends days and nights to answer Hamlet's questions to be or not to be, and gradually comes to a more gloomy development of events, and logically it deduces, then the third group of people does not suffer so much time, but immediately comes to the same conclusions, but only interprets them not in the direction of the negative, but in the side of a positive development of the event. The third group of people has some kind of knowledge, with the help of which all other knowledge, sensory or intellectual, obtained through experience or reflection, is acquired. They have this superknowledge, from which, as from seeds, a fruit grows. With this knowledge, you can get any knowledge that has been, is or will be on this earth, and in the entire universe. What is the peculiarity of this yoga, the yoga of falling in love? When a person has the highest knowledge, this state is no different from the state of falling in love. One can safely equate the possession of the highest state of love with the highest nonverbal knowledge, with which all knowledge in general is obtained. The state of supreme love contains everything that exists in the universe. But this higher state does not apply to the number of young people, girls, who say about 2 or 3 times a year that they have once again fallen in love, while claiming that their love is the highest. Let me remind you, Stanislavski's classic. I don't believe it. If a person has fallen in love very much, he is not inclined to ring about it at every corner, because this feeling captures him so much that he, like a true lover, can babble something incoherent or create in verse. There is a serious confusion of concepts and terminology. What is real love, and how to distinguish it from what we call love in everyday life and often meet in everyday life? There is a kind of knowledge through which all knowledge is acquired. And the yoga of falling in love, the highest yoga, is the tradition of an open school of yoga. One of the yoga triads declares that awareness or being in a state of higher love is equivalent to having this higher superknowledge. It would seem that this third group of people would rejoice and worry about the other two. But in this universe, everything is interconnected, and it does not happen that a person immediately falls into the third category of people without passing the first two. Before we possess this highest knowledge, we, as yoga teaches us, live through a lot of births and deaths. We live a life between births, deaths, evolve, and consistently advance. First as representatives of one of the groups of people, then over time we get into another group of people, and only then we get into the third. There is a spiritual evolution. No one gets into the third group of people without passing the first two.
In the East and in the West, the theme of wealth, happiness, fun, and enjoyment is very popular. Numerous mantras, yatras, rituals, and practices of how to become rich and happy penetrate from the East. Special mantras to attract wealth and happiness are becoming popular, and everyone is vying to learn them, practicing from morning to night. From the East come images of the personification of wealth and happiness. For example, the goddess Sri. If we consider India, then it is a very popular goddess, bestowing prosperity and abundance, and it is clear that everyone wants to be healthy and rich. After all, it is better to be healthy and rich than poor and sick. Naturally, many people are beginning to be interested in these topics. Snatching the mantra of the goddess Sri with the 16th syllable or yatra is one kind that fills your already tight wallets with green banknotes. Or make a long puja in the Indian manner, compared to which all the March cats are just resting. Everyone wants everything at once, just like that, without observing the details, letting out of mind the fact that in India, among people who understand at least something about yatra and mantras, they are connected with well-being, there is a small detail. According to Indian mythology, the goddess Sri Lakshmi had an older sister. To imagine what she looked like, you need to collect everything that can be bad about a woman and multiply it by a rather gloomy look. Because there is also a downside to prosperity. It is suffering. According to Indian tradition, before praising the younger sister, you first need to bow to the older one. Otherwise, she will remain dissatisfied and will cause obstacles in the possession of happiness and joy of the world. Myths of ancient India, a lot of informative things. A fairy tale is a lie, a long-standing hint, a lesson for good fellows. The meaning of this legend is extremely transparent. Until you see in detail all the negative side of our world, you will not understand all the beautiful things that this world can give. Until you learn to understand the sufferings, misfortunes of others, and the causes of these sufferings. And according to the axiomatics of yoga, everything comes down to ignorance, then you will not be able to take advantage of with all the joy and knowledge of the universe. More precisely, it will be very fleeting and bringing disappointment rather than satisfaction. To achieve joy, happiness, and enjoyment, you need to understand other people who are in suffering and misery, and not to harden the soul, but to do everything possible to eliminate these sorrows and misfortunes. Otherwise, your happiness from having money, power, success will be very, very short and not satisfying for you, because there will always be a bony hand of death behind your back. Hence all the horrors that the world shows us. And if you do not understand the essence of the dark side of the world, what it is and what it is for, then you will not be able to enjoy the truth of what this whole world was created for. It's like dead water that you need to drink before drinking from the source of immortality. Therefore, before you, by the first yantras you come across, do rituals for the purpose of enrichment. With the use of Indian chants and rituals, ask what you are doing. According to Indian tradition, if you pay too much attention to the younger sister, the older one will be unhappy. And if the younger sister has decided to get married, then, according to the low canons, as long as the older sister has not married, the younger one has no right to do so. All the numerous books that are now publishing yantra, mantras in 5 minutes, or yoga enrichment for those who are busy, or enriching meditations for businessmen, one way or another will contain only torn pieces from the treatise. But before you use them, think about what you are doing at all, and whether you understand what is being discussed. According to the yoga of falling in love, if you are in a state of supreme love, you have the knowledge, with which you acquire all knowledge in general. Being in the highest state of yoga, we can say that all other yogs are no longer needed. In order to do something, you need tools, but once you have done the work, the tools fall away. They are no longer needed. In this definition, we see a typical fast method. When the goal and the achievement of the goal merge, the time factor disappears. Yoga of falling in love is not just a quick method, but a very fast method.
There is a gradation of yoga into classical and fast methods. Among the fast yoga methods, there is an ultra-fast method. This is the yoga of falling in love. If you are in this state of falling in love, even for a very short time, but this is not the pseudo-love that every second person calls about, namely the highest state of falling in love, then you will simply not need all the other yogas. Ordinary classical yoga can be compared with a leisurely step, and fast methods with a racing car or an airplane. But the superfast method of yoga of falling in love is even difficult to compare with something. If only analogies from physics are given, where it is believed that the greatest speed in our universe is the speed of light, 300,000 kilometers per second. Everything is instantaneous here. An instant transformation, like an epiphany, like a flash of light, when everything becomes clear. Being in a state of supreme love, the yogi or yajin has that knowledge, the knowledge of which all other knowledge is acquired. Being in a state of supreme love, a person feels the highest joy, happiness that he can. Only we can imagine. But in fact, their condition is even higher, for which there are simply no words. And really, take a look at a little bit of a truly in love person. When asked what he feels, he begins at best to say something in verse, at worst to mumble. Me. My girlfriend. It's the same with the girl. Why? Because the tongue sticks to the palate of a person. A person is bursting with emotions, but they can escape. And the question is not that it is impossible to express it, but that there are no words to express it. A person in love sees the world from a completely different side. After all, life can be gray and uninteresting, and a person who is in a state of love disappears the negative side of this universe. Because from the point of view that he already possesses this super knowledge, everything becomes blessed. No matter what suffering a man has overcome before, no matter what unsolvable issues he solves, If all this has led him into a state of falling in love, a person always blesses his whole path. Everything that has led him to this turns into an integral part of the path, and he will not give up any of his steps. Once he has led him to this, whether it is good steps or stupid steps. But once they have brought him to this state, then the mission or purpose of the universe is fulfilled. According to the yoga of falling in love, interesting things happen to such a person after a certain time. People experiencing these states disappear somewhere, they leave our world. Not because someone is kicking them out or because there is something more fun, but because the world is falling off of them as unnecessary. This whole world is created to bring us to this state of yoga, of falling in love. This is the third state in the yoga of falling in love, when Yogi Yagi does not leave our world. The only thing they leave behind is a lot of poetic works, philosophical, extremely optimistic treatises, and exercises that allow you to get rid of this or that kind of stupidity. In other words, these are all the yogas that we use, and that bring great benefits to all of humanity. These are Katha Yoga, Kriya Yoga, Pranayama Yoga, Raja Yoga. And you can list them as many as there are manifestations of our human body. All of them are a gift from those who have reached the third stage of the yoga of falling in love and left replacement tools for us. Each of us has a flaw in one or another body or level of self-reflection. And for each pollution, one or another type of yoga is recommended so that we can overcome it faster, reach an exorbitant state, and quickly realize the plan for which this whole world was created. If we wake up and everything is bad, meaningless and not the way we like it, then this is just our interpretation of the universe from not understanding what it was created for. The universe was created for us to reach this state of falling in love. As soon as we get carried away with something extraneous that has nothing to do with this goal, that is, we show our stupidity. The universe immediately reflects on it and appears before us in such forms and circumstances that cause such a negative attitude. As soon as we move away from this royal path to the highest, the universe begins to show us that we are going in the wrong direction. All our misfortune, and sometimes slaps, in the form of collisions with death and disease. This is the compensation of the universe for the lack of a higher love in us, as well as the lack of desire to achieve this state. According to the yoga of falling in love, the universe was created only for one purpose, so that you would experience this state. If you live just like that, not striving for anything, and you don't care at all about all this love, in which you don't understand anything, then this is a clear bias. And in order to balance it, the universe makes another distortion in the circumstances of your life and the world around you, so that minus by minus gives a plus. An obvious rule in mathematics, which, even from the standpoint of higher mathematics, it is difficult to explain why minus by minus gives a plus.
The universe is a mirror image of ourselves, and the world is created for joy and happiness. It is flooded with achievements and the light of the beyond, but we do not want to see this, having tuned into a negative contribution, and the universe has surrounded us with a kind of shell, a reflection of all this negative mood, thereby encapsulating us ourselves. If you don't want to, don't look. Live by the rules that you invented for yourself. According to the yoga theme, no one has the right to impose anything on us, even a state of supreme love. We can declare, but I don't want this supreme love to be. I don't need it. I want to do something else. Dig a hole or jump, run or go to work, and not get paid. It may be exaggerated, but we mean that we want something else, and in fact, deep down, we don't know what we really want. Mirroring ourselves, the universe responds, well, live according to the laws that you have invented yourself. Do you not believe that there is the highest love? Don't. Live by the rules you believe in. You believe that there is crime around, and there should be these skinheads with gold chains everywhere, like in the 90s. Good. You will have such a paradise. What you come up with, you get. The universe doesn't rape anyone. It gives us complete freedom, even freedom in our ignorance, and does not impose anything on us, but we have to pay the price by starting to live by the rules that we invented for ourselves. We live in a cocoon of our own ideas about the world. As long as we do not abandon them ourselves, no one has the right to force us to do this. And so that the world does not seem like honey to us from our own ignorance, we see its negative side as a reminder that we can really live the way we want. But all that we see around us is dirt, horror, numerous deaths, and so on. These are echoes of the rules of the game that we have expressed it to make for our small personal universe. A person has come up with rules for himself and lives by them. From the standpoint of the yoga of falling in love, the whole world should very quickly, beautifully and inspiringly bring us to the state of the highest love, but we, by manifesting something else, block this possibility ourselves. And since no one will impose anything, then we are floundering in what we have come up with ourselves. First, we have to eat enough of everything negative so that we can express ourselves in something extremely positive. The first step is always and everywhere a person must do himself. No one will ever do it for him, because it will be a substitute for his free will. Nothing happens in the world until it happens in your head. A person who lives long and hard in the first stupid group of people eventually turns into a large group of smart people, but pessimists, and he can stay in the first or second group for as long as he wills, or, in other words, forever. The circumstances of life change. He does good and gets good, does bad gets bad. This is all called the cycle of karma, running in a circle, and it will continue as long as we express our will. What would it be, whether it will be 1,000,000 lives, 1 billion, or just 3? But if we have come to the will of something else, the situation changes. We are starting to get out of this cycle or out of this plane. And if we express our will, then we will get out of this cycle altogether. And we will fall into the third group of people who already have this knowledge. There must be a factor of expression of will. But why should we express our will to live in this beautiful universe where the yoga of falling in love rules? And not why. It's just an expression of will. It is not based on any logical conclusion, nor on your sad background. It should come out of nowhere, as glimpses of the higher meaning of your true nature, which should not rely on anything.
There is a fundamental point that all these words can only prompt you to deep thoughts about your own life. To a certain extent, they can speed up the process of realizing what you want and what you don't. But they can in no way be the basis for your expression of will, because it should not be based on anything, but come from nowhere. As if you just thought to yourself like the idea, I will that it be so. It's not because this yoga is infatuation, and brought to us with people who have passed the whole path of humanity. You never know what has passed and where has gone, you haven't seen them, and you won't be able to rely on them. The fulcrum can only be your will, so be it. And not because somewhere high up in the mountains of Tibet there live yogis and yogini who have passed all the way of humanity. And now you have to follow in their footsteps. This option won't work. This is a substitution of your free will, someone else's will. You can read any text you want, and about a healthy and happy lifestyle, and about the yoga of falling in love, which we promote. But someone can talk about completely different criteria for finding happiness. Let's say if you smash your head against the wall now, then in the next life, you will go to heaven. You never know who will come up with something. And you can very easily get lost in all sorts of theories, philosophies, or, God forbid, Satan branches. In any case, the emphasis is transferred to you, and what you hear is just a gift from teachers. They work on the principle of not imposing anything, explaining how it was with them, so that you compare how you have it. Think about it yourself at your leisure, weigh all the pros and cons, and already yourself. Without relying on any of the highest yogs and yajnas, as if 5 times Buddha or the goddess Sri herself in the flesh. We must express our will to embark on this path. Why? Not why, just like that. I just want it to be that way. These lectures help to accelerate and realize these processes. Otherwise, if you belong to the first and second group of people, you would have to walk for a very long time. Wander through the circles of experience and disappointment. You will express one thing, to live by these rules, then another, until you express yourself to live like this. From the position of the yoga of love, for which this world was created. And then your misconception about the goals of the world will disappear, and the reverse side in the form of sadness, grief, and misfortunes. But what about death? With the help of the triad, you can overcome everything and even death. And not in any allegorical sense, that you will first die and then be born again, but quite in a physical sense. You will continue your existence as long as you see fit. Sometimes it is really easier to die and be born again than to achieve this immortality so quickly in another life. At the closest, when approaching the third stage of the yoga of falling in love, all processes go very quickly, including the processes of self-knowledge. And even the slightest glimpses of experiencing the highest love, oddly enough, make you not be afraid of death. Because if you have an island of understanding how to live, and what this whole world is created for, then you will live one life. Or a series of lives in a row. All these numerous beliefs will be like a multi-part adventure series. And not as punishment and wandering from one to another circle of hell. Yogs and yoginis did not really strive for physical immortality, even with these methods. It seems strange, but we have somewhat different concepts about what we need to strive for, and what we don't need. Everything is overcome. From the point of view of axiomatics, all the darkness and inconsistencies of the world. This is the universe's response to your will to live in ignorance and suffering. The implicit may be indirect. You may want happiness for yourself, but it's wrong. And since all our desires tend to come true, it turns out that way.
If we don't follow this direction of falling in love, then we lose everything. Imagine that you are in prison, you were imprisoned for some sins, and you can look for the best place in the cell, or a non-dusty activity behind barbed wire. But it's still a prison, even if you're in the most privileged place. The challenge is to get out of this prison at all, which we have built with our own ignorance. And now, we are still trying to find the most comfortable place in this own prison, not realizing that it is still a prison, and it is better to spend time and effort, not to get a better job, but to get out of it altogether. It is the same with regard to the yoga of falling in love. All the goals that we set for ourselves can be intermediate and quite worthy for the development of our intelligence, thinking, and so on. But in the end, all of this is secondary to the highest goal. In different yogs, this goal is called differently. In the yogs of knowledge, it is called the acquisition of knowledge, of that by which all knowledge is acquired. And as soon as a person practicing yoga experiences this highest state, for a fraction of a second, enough to taste what it is, but not enough to overcome all his ignorance, and enter the third stage of the yoga of falling in love, priorities, goals, and a person's inner attitude to life are radically changing. This is the end of the lecture. We will continue further.
And we repeat that we are a teacher of an internationally open yoga university, and all the information, as well as these lectures, can be found on our websites yogaclass.com and Triad website.
Yes, and we are recruiting a new group this year already in 2025. It will be called Shakti 25. So join us. See you soon. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.